So we were watching the Super Bowl, and within the first maybe 5 minutes of watching, I realized that there were 3 people at the Super Bowl or involved with the Super Bowl that I'd worked with. And I say that only because it immediately made me think of the podcast and think of why the podcast was important to me. And how, like, when I first heard of the idea of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, do you remember that infographic?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was living in a small town in Indiana. I didn't know anybody. So I was like, I guarantee I'm not 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, much less anyone else. Yeah. And when I was watching the game, Reba came out and sang one of the opening songs. And a good friend of mine in Nashville, who I worked with for a long time, his wife manages Reba. And so I immediately texted him and I was like, damn, she's looking good. And he was like, oh, it's been a big week, and sent me a picture of her with like this massive piece of chocolate cake. And
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And Reba did look good. And then Taylor Swift obviously was there. And I worked with her early on in my career. And one of her music videos was shot in an apartment I lived in.
Sure was.
And then who else was there? Oh, Jerry Rice. So I'm not like I don't know a lot of football history or names. I'm actually bad with names, period.
Yeah.
But Jerry Rice came on this, I think, to introduce one of the teams, probably the San Francisco team. And I was like, oh, I've worked with him before. And Saichin was like, why have you worked with Jerry Rice? And I was like, we did some commercials with him and Rice-A-Roni. And so I texted April and I was like, yo, Jerry Rice. And it's just like these silly little things that in my mind, I just find them quirky and I think them and then I kind of like immediately write them off. But when I stop and take a step back, if I went back to my childhood and I was like, hey, one day you will be less than 6 degrees from Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Much less like, what is Kevin Bacon? Like, I don't actually even know a Kevin Bacon movie. But yeah, so I think it just reiterated in my mind, like, this is why this podcast and this idea is important to me, because we joke all the time about how there are like all these people that I have connections with somehow, but I don't think about the fact that I have the connections with them.
Yeah.
And they could be helpful to somebody. And so it's like, let's pass it along. I've had a million people step it out and give me opportunities along the way. And it's like, I want to be able to return that favor. Even if it's just through storytelling and people can relate to think like, oh, if Jen can do that, then I can do that, or whatever. So it was like a fun kind of surprise thing. Like, I knew we were watching the Super Bowl, but I didn't really know anything besides that. And then immediately I was like, oh.
That's so funny. Yeah, I don't know any of those people and I've never worked with any of them, but it's cool that for me, you are one of those degrees for me. So even though I don't know anybody, I could say that I'm probably 6 degrees from most people, literally just because of you. You're the degree, Jen.
Yes, so. I share my degrees.
So this is the first episode of the Adventure Club. I'm Kate.
I'm Jen.
And we're so happy you guys are here. When Jen asked me to be part of this, it's funny because we are sisters and I am Jen's younger sister, but our lives have been so aggressively different in like pretty much every single way. And so I've always kind of looked at Jen's life as this crazy adventure. She's traveled so much more than me. I've never had a passport. Jen's been all over the world. She's worked with crazy celebrities and worked on all these award shows. And I've just kind of always been that sister that like watched from a distance. I like live my life. I married my high school sweetheart. We had kids, my first kid at 23. I have 3 kids now, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for a decade. So our lives are just super different. And I think that, you know, when you first asked me to do this podcast with you, at first I was like, I'm so aggressively underqualified to speak on adventures. But I think the more that we spoke, it's like an adventure can be all kinds of things. It can be somebody that gets to travel or have really cool work experiences, or great friendships, or it can be somebody that is almost, I feel like I'm kind of like a professional hype man, like I support my kids. I'm the stay-at-home parent, so I support them in that way. I'm a big support for my husband. We've moved to follow his career, and I've just kind of always taken a back seat professionally, so that I can kind of help him get to the next place that he wants to be. So I think that we bring very different perspectives, but we both have lived lives that are full of stories to tell.
That is the truth. Yeah. And I think your life to me has been such an adventure. And it's funny because I think we always just look at our own experience and we have our thoughts about it. But I didn't get married until last year, and I'm 39. So took me a long time to find my person. You found Logan when you were 16.
Yes.
So literally took me twice as long. And I haven't had any kids. I did buy a condo once, but you had bought multiple houses at that point. So it's funny. And I think it's important to call out 5.5 years older than Kate. So in a lot of ways, Kate has lived these adventures that have been delayed or still haven't come for me. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting perspective to have both of us on here talking about adventure and what that looks like. Because for me, some of my adventures that I've wanted to have since I was a kid have been deferred or just came true. And for you, some of your adventures and goals related to career have been deferred. Or just haven't come true yet. So I think that it's a really interesting perspective to have both of us talk about it.
Yeah. And I'm excited because we are going to have a lot of people that we both have met. The majority of people I've met are through my experience as Logan's professional hype man. But you've also met so many cool people through your work. And so we're going to have them on every so often and interview them and kind of talk about how they started their adventures and who helped them get there, and kind of just try to give people as many tools that they can have within every industry out there. Do you want to talk about, I guess, just some of the professions that you already know we're going to be able to kind of chat through?
Yeah. So we have a couple of people lined up that we're looking forward to talking to: managers who manage musicians, directors, people who direct music videos, films, award-winning directors, but people who, everyone has a story from where they've started out, but it's really interesting because I feel like some of the people we are already planning on talking to all have these very different starting points. Like the origin of their story is so different, even if they end up adjacent to each other in the industry. And so I think that's super cool. But we're also planning talking to people who have lived really crazy adventures related to travel, related to personal goals, related to fitness, a lot of areas. So it'll be a lot of people from my industry, but a lot of people not from my industry.
Yeah. And I guess on the topic too of origin stories, we could give a little bit of background into our stories. But I feel like because you're my big sister, so much of my origin story is tied to watching you. So it feels like maybe you should go first.
Or maybe we should tell each other's. I feel like sometimes people tell other people's stories better.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. No, I could try. So you, as a kid, it felt like, from my perspective as your little sister, we were very opposite in that way too. I was a dusty little tomboy, doing basically anything that I could do to torment you and make you uncomfortable because you, bless, were a bit of a germaphobe, a bit of a hypochondriac. And so it felt like anything that I picked up on you worrying a lot, but I didn't have that worry. I didn't have that natural anxiety that you were blessed with. So for me, it was like, what can I do to kind of poke at her? But hey, maybe I made you stronger. Okay, maybe I don't know. But yeah, and then we started to get kind of close. The older that I got in high school, you went to a college very close to home, 30 minutes away. And so we were still always around each other. You invited me to like go to church with you or get dinner with you. Like you were always super intentional in making time for you and I to have a relationship together. And that was something that I think for a long time I like definitely took for granted. I didn't realize how rare that was to have an older sibling that really, really, really cared about keeping us close. And then you started your college career as a telecom major. You graduated in telecommunications, and then you moved to Nashville.
Is like such a terrible name for a subject.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, I didn't even know what that meant.
Like, do I just call people and ask for money? Because that's what it sounds like.
It really does. Yeah. Yeah. I had no idea for a long time what you actually were going to school for. I just remember you telling me that you took like an editing class that you thought was really boring and tedious. And then I remember that you got like your only like not A. I don't even know if you got a C in it, but it wasn't an A in like an astronomy class. And you were super pissed because
I wasn't even going to be able to keep the C.
And you took it because you thought that you would like be fine. You thought it would be like an easy course, and it was not.
That was when I realized liberal arts is where I needed to stay.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the liberal arts.
Yes. And so then, yeah, you knew you were going to move to Nashville, which again, it was this thing where, you know, we grew up with like blue collar parents that had very blue collar jobs. Our dad worked in concrete and our mom was like a customer service rep at a tool company. So it was like, I didn't understand that what you were doing was even an option.
Yeah.
And I was honestly still kind of confused. I remember the first few things that you sent me when you moved down there, you had like done a photo shoot. You were taking pictures of like Barbies and these like professional. It was so funny though. It was like,
it was a music video.
Was it a music video?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I thought that was so funny. And then you told me that you did a shoot for Brian Luttrell. Is that what his last name is?
Yeah.
From Backstreet Boys. And that was right after Backstreet Boys were like popping, you know? And he had like went off on a solo journey, which, you know, I don't think panned out super great. But you were working on it and that was sick. That was insane. And then I just kind of watched your life like take off from there. You were so willing to like, you moved to Atlanta by yourself and you didn't stay very long because it was not a great experience for you. But you just kind of were always like willing to like bop around. And then when you were back in Nashville, but you were traveling all over the place with work. And it felt like you went from doing these little things to these insanely large projects. And then I remember, it's funny when you did the shoot with Taylor Swift at your place, it was her and Kelly Pickler. And I remembered that like, I knew both of those names, but I wasn't a country music person.
Yeah.
But I thought that Kelly Pickler was the bigger artist. I thought that was like the bigger deal. And then I just thought it was really, really, really cool that they shot that in your place.
I think at the time she might have been a bigger deal because she was on American Idol, right?
Yeah, I think she.
So I think that was like at the heyday of American Idol, and so she was like a newly launched artist.
New name. Yes, arguably probably her best season of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it just kind of felt like every time I talked to you, you were doing something else that I was like, how in the world is she doing these? How are you doing these things? Who do you fucking know?
Also,
because we came from a town that had nobody.
Also, how am I doing those things? Because
my anxious big sister, I
was so scared of everything. I think.
Yeah. The thought that you even were okay to like, the thought that you were even okay to like support yourself and not rely on having a partner to help you with bill. It was like you were juggling all of it on your own. And that was like insane to me because I couldn't fathom the amount of things that you had to keep track of.
Well, I think that anyone that knew us growing up, if they were to wager money, they would have said you would have been the one to leave. And I would have been the one to stay because I was so scared. It was like, I wasn't a risk taker. I wanted to be like close enough to like the naughtiness that was going on, but I didn't want to like actually get in trouble. Like I didn't want to do anything that I could get in trouble for. Yeah. I didn't want to stay home alone because I was scared.
You would not stay home alone without drawing the curtains in the house.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
And like, I think it is important to mention, we lived like on 5 acres, which isn't, we were like not living in the woods, but we were living in the woods.
Yeah. The driveway is like off the road. Yeah. Covered by woods. It was.
And I just watched too many scary movies. So I was like, somebody's going to always break into our house. And Dad was like, no one's going to break into our house.
Oh.
But then, funny, I moved to Atlanta and within a week, someone broke into our house.
Yeah. And you held the door open for him, you sweet thing.
And I came home while they were breaking into our house and parked next to them and watched them carry stuff out, made eye contact with them and was like, man, somebody had a bad fight with their boyfriend. Like didn't recognize the stuff because it was like my roommates.
And it was like cookie sheets. Like,
and it was like cookie
really
sheets. They had like
out.
taken everything at that point. And then I walked up to the door and it was unlocked. And then I was like, and the guy peeled out. And then I was like, now he can't even live here because he knows what I look like. And he knows I know what he looks like. And so we had to like, this is dramatic, but like go into hiding. Like we had to literally leave the neighborhood and like move somewhere else. And then when they finally caught him, his last name was Slaughter. And they were like, do you want to come to court and try and get like any money back and like say, but, and I'm like, his last name's Slaughter. No.
Yeah, absolutely not. I don't. He can have it. Thank you.
Yeah. So nobody expected me to leave. Is the point of that story.
Yeah. But you did. And then you just kept moving around. And then even like, you stayed in Nashville for like, after you moved to Atlanta, you came back to Nashville. And then you were at Nashville for like a long time, right? Like 15 years before New York?
I was there for 15 years before New York. I did move back to Indianapolis for 1 year.
For 1 year, which is funny because it was the year that I moved from Indiana. I moved from that area way up north. So it was like you moved and we had the potential to be within close proximity again. And then I was like 4 hours up to the very tip top of Indiana, which at that point was the farthest I had gotten away from her hometown. But yeah, and then even when you were like, hey, so a friend of mine really wants to move to New York. And so I think we're just going to like go for like a year, 6 months, 6 to 12 months, maybe. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean you're just going to like move during COVID? Like, what do you mean you're going to move to New York?
Germaphobe moves to New York during COVID.
Like, what the fuck? Yeah. But you did, and you made it work. And then from New York, you went to Denver, right?
Brief stint in Cincinnati.
Oh, I forgot about Cincinnati. Yeah, brief stint in Cincinnati with Seichin, and then to Denver. And then now you're a married gal in Denver, but you don't know if you guys will stay there or not. It's like you've been able to kind of bop all around. And I definitely thought that would be my life because there's nothing about Indiana that I love or find enjoyable outside of being close to our family, which I didn't think was enough to keep me there. But it wasn't until COVID that we ended up moving from Indiana so that Logan, my husband, could pursue a career opportunity. And now I'm like, damn, I kind of miss Indiana. And I'm like, ew, like whoever thought that I would say that? That's disgusting.
Yeah. And I do think it's important to call out that when I left, it was just me. And then, and that is easier. And I moved.
But that's scary. Like,
for sure.
That you've been so willing to just like Nashville. Move. Yeah. Like that was wild to me.
You know what's even more wild is I left my senior year early. Do you remember that? Like I finished my studies early to go do that unpaid internship in Nashville. And so I missed my senior year with my friends because the first semester I moved back home and lived with you guys to save money so I could afford to move to Nashville. And then I left. And so I missed out on so many typical like
senior year college stuff. Yeah.
With all your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, I've just kind of been watching you go all over the place. And I don't know if that's why it's been easy. It was easier for me, I guess, to like not, it was like for a lot of times I felt like I was like vicariously living through you, or like, I knew that if I was, itching to do something, I could call you and you could like put me on as a PA for a couple of shoots or something. You know, there was like a way for me to still kind of like tag along.
Yeah.
But also like, you know, I had kids so young, which it doesn't even, you know, at the time I thought I was like fully grown, you know, like
I know it's tricky.
Graduated college. We bought a house. I bought a car by myself, and then I got pregnant, which we intentionally tried for that. And then got married, and I felt like I would just like had it all figured out, and I was just going to stay home and support Logan while he grew his business. And then it just kind of like felt like then I got kind of stuck in this season of like, well, it makes more sense for me to help Logan and not have him have to hire someone than for me to go get a job so that we can take my salary and then basically just give that to somebody else to help Logan at work.
Well, and I think that's the part that makes also our story so different, is because so long I, only had to pay for myself. I didn't have people to even like worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't have the person that I had to think about. Mm-hmm. So it was like lonely in a lot of ways, but it was also very freeing in the sense that I could make a lot of decisions. And it really was like just me. So if I was fine with it, it was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I look at my life now as someone who's been a stay-at-home mom for literally a decade, which feels insane to me. That was never, in my mind, that was never the plan for me to do that. But I find this like fear in the idea of starting over. It's like, you have these waves of like, oh, the moment passed for me. Like I made the choice to do what I'm doing, and I'm like thankful that I got to do that, and I got to spend all this time with my kids. And my kids now are 10, 4, and 2. So my middle's getting ready to go to kindergarten in the fall, and then I just have a couple years left with the littlest before he goes to school. And it just feels like I settled into this spot, and I don't know. But I think that's like what I'm hoping to get out of this podcast, and hopefully give to other people, is that like, even when it feels like maybe we've made these choices that got us to the place that we're in now, and so we can't go back and undo those things. I can't go back and wait to have kids. I can't go back and say, hey, I'm going to put my kids in daycare from the jump so that I can also have a career and build that. My hope is to gain the confidence and the courage to do the things that I do want to do now, and not feel like it's something where I have to, for a long time I felt like, well, I have to wait for my littlest to start school, and then I can only have my dream from 8 to 3, right? Like I can fall in the school window, and then I have to be there to like get the kids off the bus or watch them after that. And when you marry somebody that is a big dreamer, like my husband is, and you have people in your life like my sister who is a big dreamer that did all these things, it's like, it's hard for me to think about what dreams are for me and what they mean for me, because all of my dreams have had this timeline of like, well, the kids need to get in school because we don't live in a place where we have any sort of help. We don't have family close by or anything. And then your dream still has to fall in between this timeline because you're the default parent. And I don't say that to shit on Logan at all, because that was the role that we chose, right? That was the life that we chose. And but it feels like my dreams have always just had this like big asterisk on them. So then at a certain point, after so many years of waiting, you just start to think like, well, maybe it's just not worth it. Like I just keep doing what I'm doing and try to find joy in that. But
I hear some similarities in what you're saying though. And the times that I used to call you sometimes borderline like hysterical of just feeling like my moment had passed to meet my person. Because that was such a big goal for me for so long, was to have a partner and to just have, you know, like the perma best friend. It's like, hey, you're here for life. And I went through all the things of like doubting the decisions I had made, and you know, did I pour myself into work too much? I was traveling so much? Was I not focusing on meeting people? Had my moment passed? I think there's a lot of pressure on women. It's getting a lot better. And thankfully our family wasn't bad about this at all. But this pressure of like, if you don't get married in your 20s, then you're like old and never going to find anyone who wants to marry you or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was living in the South, which Nashville's progressive-ish, but there's still some of that mentality. And then if you become even borderline successful, that can become a problem, like with the gender roles and stuff. And so I don't know. I hear a lot of similarities in what you're saying, even though they're totally different, like life goals. Like I wanted a partner, you wanted a career, but they have these same like undercurrent of fear. And the fear tells you, I'm not going to be able to have that. Maybe my moment passed. I'm just going to have to be okay with this. How do I become okay with this? And any of those times I called you, what did you tell me?
Yeah, that it was coming, that it wasn't something to think was never going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
And so I think this is like also part of the point of the podcast is like to meet people where they are, because we're going to interview people who are at the peak right now. And hopefully they just keep climbing, but maybe this is like the climax of their career. We're going to meet people who are on the other side of that and are reflecting back on a really amazing career. We're going to meet people in all these different stages and like dreams deferred. And it's like talking to those people to say, you don't have to give up on that dream. Maybe it's not for right now, but like, what little things can you do now to kind of keep feeding that dream?
Yeah.
And know that dream has every bit of potential to come true.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't come true right now. Because we definitely live in like a right now culture.
We really do. Yeah, it's quite hard.
And by flip, like thinking about the fact that for me, I watched you as I dated. Oh, I had the worst dating experiences in high school and college and in Nashville and back home when I came back home for that year. Woo. And I was watching you, and you had met your person when you were 15. And then you had a kid, and you guys were raising a family. And like, I was just like blown away by the adventure you were on, because it seemed so untenable to me. It was like, I can't even find somebody that I want to like date long enough to have an anniversary to celebrate. Like, I can't dream about having a husband. I can't dream about having a kid. So yes, I think that's where our lives have paralleled in so many different ways, watching each other have these things that we had as like deep desires.
Yeah.
And being able to like encourage each other in that. And also like definitely not be jealous of the other person. But there is a sadness. It's like you're happy for them, but you're also kind of still sad for yourself. Like, I'm going to have that one day, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how life goes too, because I think that it's we've talked about my husband being this big dreamer and having all of these goals that he had set and realistically hit, and now he's in a place of like, now what? And so it's like, I think it's funny, there are these perspectives that we will have as women in the workplace or stay-at-home moms, but also so many of our guests are going to be men or male presenting people that also have stories to tell that maybe they don't feel, nobody's feeling like sorry for white men in the workforce, right? Like nobody's feeling sorry for them.
For a white man in the workforce.
But I think like on the aspect of just like men in general and having these kind of pressures about them, and like with Logan, the pressure that he has as a provider, because that was the role that he was placed in early in our relationship, and maybe his desire to like not carry that full burden anymore, but not knowing how to maneuver out of that space too. Sure. And I think it'll be interesting, with you and Saichin, like his perspective on like the cultural differences of like what he is expected to be within his family structure culturally versus what you're used to, and how kind of that dynamic plays out. So I think that
I guess we should cover that. That's like a big part of the story too. And part of the adventure for me is like growing. The town we grew up in, I was thinking how crazy this was the other day. There was one high school for the whole county.
Yeah.
And in my graduating class, I think there were like 175 people. So small town. At the time, not diverse at all.
No.
And I ended up marrying an Indian man who's been in the United States for, I think, 8 years now.
Yeah.
And so when I met his family, like we got on a plane and I flew for 15 hours and landed in India, and they all speak a different language, and it's a regional language. Like, life just, you never know what's going to happen.
You really don't.
So if I thought I couldn't find a partner, well, I guess I didn't find a partner who was growing up anywhere near me, but like, it's hard to say what your career could be in 5 years or 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, I never would have imagined that Saichin was the person I was going to find. And he was exactly the person I needed to find.
Yeah. It's fucking wild how that stuff plays out.
It is weird. But I also think that a lot of the people in the industry that I work with, female or male, there is that anyone who's creative or works in a creative industry, there is this pressure of, even when you get your goal, it's like, it is the now what? It's like, can I sustain this? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
Will this thing last? Will I become irrelevant? And I do think that's different than other industries. At least it feels different. Like, I feel like I have a couple of friends who work in the medical field, and it's like, the longer you're in the medical field, the more esteemed you are. It's almost like the more your feet are steady.
Yeah.
And I don't know, in the creative field, I worked with a lot of female stylists in Nashville. And as they got older, there was like a lot of times like they were not included in like the discussion about who to get hired, especially if it was a younger artist. And so there is this like age factor that I think a lot of creatives fight. And then just depending on the niche, you always have to like reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure of that, even for the white man. But I think it will be interesting to have a male's perspective. That's like a great thing to call out, just having two females here.
Yes.
Having a blend of people from different backgrounds, different genders will be super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully we're able to, really just provide some tools, or even if nothing else, just a place where people can feel reinvigorated, encouraged, or like they're not the only ones that worry that all of their dreams have passed them by. We want to be a place where people can feel like, no, really, truly, anything is possible. And even though change can be scary or uncomfortable, we're hoping to provide some resources for people on like, where to go if they want to get involved in this kind of career, or what to read if they need help with this part of their, professional development. Like, we want to be a place that provides those resources and that kind of just support if you feel like you don't have the support within your life, or you don't have the tools, you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go. It's like, hopefully this can be just a small piece of that puzzle for people moving forward.
Yeah, I think encouragement and like inspiration through storytelling, and then access to people who have already done the thing or are doing the thing. And I think that access and that mentorship can be the one thing that really turns your entire path. And I can think of a couple of people off the top of my head that if they hadn't presented themselves in my life and then opened a door for me, my path could look very different in terms of what I was able to do. And one of those people will actually have on pretty early into our time. And I'm excited about that because he definitely opened a ton of doors for me. And he didn't know me very well. He just saw something in me and gave me an opportunity. And mentorship was important to him and has continued to be important to him. And I just think there's so much power in community.
Yeah.
And being able to say, like, we're here to support your dreams, like both just like to give you a pat on the back, but also like, here's the tools.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that I've really found in the creative industry, and with a lot of the people that you are tied to, you know, they've always been like, not only so kind, like just genuinely very like kind, empathetic people, but also like so willing to give that help, to give that support, to give those opportunities. And then you have to work hard, you know, to continue to earn opportunities past that. But we've had a lot of people that you're connected to that are willing to open doors for us and for Logan, or, you know, like I mentioned earlier with PA work for me, everyone was always so kind. And I think part of that was because I was your little sister, but but I think even
Nashville
people that
is a
didn't
really
know that
good community for that. So I think I'm really glad that that's related. I had the thought one day, when we shot the Jerry Rice commercial, we shot it in Chicago, and I was like, Chicago's exactly the same amount of distance from our house as Nashville, and I never even considered Chicago.
Yeah.
But
Chicago's
I think it was just because I wanted to do
You
music videos, and I wanted to do Christian music videos when I first moved. And so Chicago was like more like the rap scene.
Yeah. Also weather-wise, I can't imagine you living in a place. It's funny to me that you live in Denver because you're not a cold girly. You don't like that. So Nashville was better fit geographically for you.
Yeah,
also.
that is true.
Potentially maybe even a little farther south would have been better for you. But you know, Denver's home for now. So
for now.
But yeah. Do you feel like maybe we could wrap up?
Yeah, I think let's wrap it up. And we look forward. One, we're happy anyone's even listening. And we hope to grow this community just so that it builds up everyone's like excitement for what their dream is, no matter what it is. And so I really look forward to just like interacting with people. And I think not only will we have the podcast, but we'll also have an online community where people can ask questions and we can really provide those resources. So I'm looking forward to see how that grows.
Well, it's funny because one thing that you and I have always kind of talked about in comparison with our lives is, you know, I got lucky with love early. You've been really lucky with friendships, and I have not been. So I think for me, you know, I recognize the power that friendships play in your life, and specifically, I really love female friendships. And so my hope is that if anybody else out there like me doesn't have a very strong female friendship circle in their life, I'm hoping that this provides that opportunity for us, even if it starts out as an online female circle. I need it. So come on, babes.
Yeah.
I'm a good friend.
I have some good friends. I'll share.
I'm a good friend. I just can't find a good friend. Damn it. So help.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Love you. Bye.